Hey everyone, just watching the comments down here on my computer, seeing how many people are going to join in tonight. I'm showing up and just being present for you, my family out there, my community, those that support the movement and where we're going, to reach out to families and their loved ones and to promote change in the lives of our society and our communities. I've been tired all day. We'll just hang out for a while. I can't really see how many people are chiming in or showing up on this side of things, but if you do have a comment, chat. I have my computer over here. I'm looking at the same thing you're looking at. I can't see you or what you're commenting outside of what's on my computer here. But I want you to know I'm here tonight. I want to have like an open question and discussion format where we can actually just have a conversation about what's real and what's not. I want to be a little controversial. The treatment world as we know it could be more effective. The programs and the way we operate are like cookie cutter and the same, and it's almost like if nothing changes, nothing changes. What do we need to do as a community of treatment providers, coaches, mentors to help make our patients and our clients' lives more full and give them prolonged and extended sobriety periods, if not a life? For me, it starts with that initial introduction to a path out of despair, a path out of that mental place of the fog that you don't know how to get out of. It's one of those places that I know well personally and that I was in, and I know what it's like to sit in the chair of an addict that has no idea how to grow up, live their life, and be successful. I think stopping, arresting that moment with your loved one and saying, let's just have a conversation, whatever form of intervention that might be, getting them in a place where they'll listen for a few moments to love and empathy and compassion, to letting them know that you love them and care about them and you want them to get help, supporting them in finding and getting the help necessary to help them get that journey started. Because recovery, let's just be honest, 30 days is just enough time to pull our you know what out of our you know what. I mean, let's just be real. Nobody transforms their lives in 30 days. It's a stabilizing period. Residential detox and residential treatment are a stabilizing period at the beginning of the journey. Real recovery works or begins once the mind comes back to some semblance of a place of homeostasis. Let me see, I got a comment. Give me 1 second. Whole lotta. Hey, hi Sharon. Whole lotta. Just sitting here, open question and answer around addiction. I'm making a commitment to be more present at least 4 times a week and doing a live, scheduling it so you know I'm going to be here. Because right now the recovery community as we understand it isn't really working functionally. So many people are going through these spin dry cycles, getting out and coming back and getting out and coming back, that insurance companies and families are getting tired of footing the bill. And we have to come up with a better idea of working together as a team and a community. Let me see what we're doing over here. 24 years, Sharon? Wow. Let me see if I can blow this up so I can actually see this thing and cover the page. Can I do that? Can somebody give me some help? I wish I could blow this up more. Or not. Well, I just did something stupid. I'll come back in a second, folks. There we go. Sonia, how you doing? For those of you joining in tonight, this is a new endeavor for me, social media. I'm building a platform out. I've been sober 32 years next month. And it doesn't mean much in the big scheme of things because I still have to do the things I teach clients and loved ones to do every day. I still have to show up every day. I have to practice abstinence. I have to practice showing up and caring for my family and myself and living in integrity. When I make a mistake, quickly clean it up and do the right thing. Um, I know my character. I know the hard work it takes to transform one's life from utter despair and degradation to being a responsible citizen. And I say that with utter gratitude. Um, I'm looking down here. What did I do? What do you mean by that? Drugs, my lifestyle, my addiction? Curious. I love the questions. Um, Hi, Nat. Is it Norma? Hi, Norma. Blessings to you and all of you joining in. Um, for me, I guess of just a brief history since a lot of new faces are showing up tonight. Again, my name's Lance Wright. I'm an addiction recovery specialist. I work across greater Los Angeles and Orange County. I'm developing a program with someone where I'm going to be a program coordinator and director at a treatment center for youth and working with their families. I'm doing all kinds of stuff to try to reach out and help people. In my 32 years of sobriety, I've learned a lot, I've did a lot, I've been around a lot of people. I've seen what works and what doesn't work. And I'm trying to put that together so that I can help you, help those around you live healthier, better lives. Let me see. What did you do? Well, starting out, I guess going back to as early as I can remember, being a very abandoned, unloved, unwanted kid where, and again, this is without judgment today, just how it was as a kid. My mom was a drug addict alcoholic in the 1960s, and she struggled mightily with her own world and what she went through. And eventually, I grew up around her not being real present and spent most of my time home alone with my little dachshund dog, Duchess, wondering if mom was going to come home. My earliest memories were sitting in the middle of the bed at night in the dark, wondering if mom was going to come home holding Duchess. And it's really a sad picture in my mind to think about, but I survived and I'm here today. Around five-ish, I started to really realize that I was different than other kids. I didn't have parents that were really present. I didn't have good clothes. I didn't have money. I didn't have the things other kids have, much like probably most of the kids in the communities that we service. And around five, I was in kindergarten. I got kicked out of kindergarten for hitting another kid with a block because I didn't know how to socialize. I'd never gotten that when I was young. And I also had ADHD that they diagnosed at the school with the doctor, but my mom didn't let me take medications because at an early age, she said they were wrong and bad. So I had untreated ADHD. And as a result of that, spent more time in the principal's office on the bench than in the classroom. And so it reinforced this little idea within me that I was that little bastard kid. And hi, Miami, how are you? And so around 6, 7 years old, I can't be accurate because who remembers everything exact in that time. I remember how I felt about myself, different, less than, not equal to, and I couldn't put these words on it. It was just, as a little kid, it's a place of feeling. Some of you might understand what I mean. Different. And one day coming home from wherever I was at, I walked by a yard in the neighborhood, and there was a rack of Coke bottles, a couple racks of Coke bottles. And I had taken those same type of things to the store for my mom at one point or another to get money for her, quarters or whatever have you, or to buy milk. And so I realized that I could get quarters for the pinball games where we used to play down by the Greyhound bus station, me and my little buddies, 3 or 4 of us. And I remember up to that point, feeling less than, and my buddies would give me quarters or that extra game they won, but I never had money like them. I didn't have good things like them. I didn't go to Little League. I didn't have that kind of stuff. So, I was like again, that little bastard kid in my thinking. And so that day I grabbed those Coke bottles. and I take them down to the corner store and I get a handful of quarters. I have to say that was the first time I've really experienced being high. And when I say high, I mean it changed the space in my head and in my soul that I wasn't different than other kids in that moment. I had money like them. Actually, I had more than them, and it felt amazing. I was up here in the sky. And so I ran over to the pinball place, and I'm handing out quarters left and right. And my friends are happy. They're free money, you know, and I'm playing 10 pinball games, and I feel the best I've ever felt as a little kid. But what happens when the quarters go away? It's like a junkie running out of dope. I have to get more. And now I know what fixes my head and my heart and soul in that feeling place and what makes me feel good. So mom's piggy bank, the purse, you name it. I became a little thief. I wasn't crazy, but I was starting to snipe a quarter, a dollar here, a dollar there, $3, $5. And getting those quarters and having that money gave me a sense of identity and purpose and equality. And lo and behold, I ran into somebody who one day said, hey, you know what? Come on, let's go over here to Sears and get you some clothes. Because I was running around in these osh-bagosh like overalls with Winnie the Pooh on them, and I hated it. I remember feeling like I just didn't like to be in public because of the way I was dressed, the way I looked. I had a whole lot of insecurities, even though I didn't understand that word then. And I hope this is connecting to some of you about those inner feelings that we have as kids that we don't talk about, we don't know about. And it's really early. It's the formation of one's character and way of thinking and seeing the world and their place in it. And so I learned how to shoplift and I have new clothes. I have shoes, pants, a shirt, a hat, baseball mitt, whatever. And again, it helped me feel normal to have what other kids have. And now I was a little thief. I was a pretty good little thief too, because my mom never questioned it. I'd just say, you know, Marco gave it to me. And she'd be like, oh, that's nice. And then she'd be off doing her thing, doing her chasing, whatever she was doing or chasing that given day. And between 6 and 9 years old, I pretty much, that was the pattern of my life. My drug or my high was having what other kids had. It changed the space in my mind and made me feel normal. Now, at 9 years old, I was pretty much a little thief at that time. Not crazy, but a little thief. And my education, I was probably a CB student. It wasn't that I lacked intelligence and couldn't do the work. I just couldn't sit still. And so at 9, I remember distinctly being in an aunt's house or a family friend. Everybody was an aunt or uncle in my mom's world. My aunt went under a tray and pulled out a tray and rolled a cigarette and lit it. Passed it to my uncle, who passed it to my mom, who passed it to my cousin, who passed it to me. And of course, everybody's doing it, so I'm going to do it. This must be okay. And I smoked pot for the first time. And that first hit, I choked, I coughed, I gagged, basically, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I did probably too much on that first hit. And I remember not liking like that, a moment of like that choking and all that. But by the time that joint got back around the second time, I started to feel a little better, a little different, a little more calm, a little more relaxed. And it was amazing. Now I had something that I knew, this changed me. This changed how I felt about myself, how I could relax, I could slow down a little bit. This was great. So now, of course, immediately, I'm a little pothead and a little thief. And I spent a lot of time at my aunt and uncle's house, need to say, hanging out with my cousin, smoking pot. And of course, here I am at school, I'm stealing stuff. I have candy, I have clothes, I have money. Now I have pot. Everybody liked me. And my identity in that world became my addiction. Having those things that changed the space within me that I didn't like, that little bastard kid place, I was burying it deeper and deeper. And I wasn't going to ever go back there because now I knew how to fix it. And I would say between 9 and 12, I pretty much did every drug under the sun. And I think Probably the only things I didn't do were really the hardcore ones like meth or opioids, but I did everything else from weed to cocaine and alcohol and everything in between, experimental, social stuff. I always liked weed though. That was my go-to. It was cheap. It was readily available in Northern California. I had a lot of people, and I was a little pot thief. I'd steal plants every now and then if I knew where they were at. I was out of control. But something happened in around seventh grade that really shifted my perspective on things. Is I was a truant. I wasn't going to school. I wasn't present. I'd rather be down at the creek smoking pot and shooting birds with pellet guns. Sounds crazy, but you know, it was like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. And I had a couple buddies, and we cut school, and we just get in trouble. And I got sent to juvenile hall for truancy. Now, I don't know about you, but the first time I was sent to juvenile, I was scared to death. I'm like, I'm going to jail. The police, I'm in a van. Oh my God, the world's going to end. And I remember walking into juvenile hall through the little big doors into the wing they put me in. And you know, it wasn't scary no more because I knew everybody there. All my little troublemaker friends I was running around with were there. It was like, okay, I didn't like being locked up, but it wasn't scary. And I learned how to exist in a locked up situation because I had peers, and it was like somehow manageable and better than home in many ways because I was getting food and attention. But that began a cycle of going in and out of juvenile halls, youth camps, programs, until eventually around 16, maybe 17, my criminal record was expanding into home burglaries, warehouses, you know, stuff like that. And my drug abuse was advancing into harder and harder usage, except for I wasn't using the hard drugs yet, but it was pretty out of control between drugs and crime and just basically living irresponsible. In about 16, I was in a program, and I've shared this in another live, and I'll continue to share it and connect with you, and I'll be coming with more topics. If you have questions, please put them in, or if you have comments, please put them in, and I'm here to respond or answer. But about 16, I was in a program, and they were taking me home to see my mom, my counselor was. And about halfway home, he pulls over, and he says, I'm taking you home because your mom's going to tell you she has cancer. And I want you to be prepared for that. I didn't hear cancer. I heard your mom's going to die. And it was unbearable. You have to understand, even as bad as it was at home with mom, and as many issues as I had with my mother, she was still mom. I know that sounds crazy, but I loved her, and that was my home. That was the one person in the universe that I could connect with. And when I heard the counselor say that, whatever lights were on in my house went out. I was like, screw God, screw everything. I don't want to deal with it. And I started to run even harder into drugs and alcohol and the chaos I was living in. And I would say within 3 months, I got out of that program. And one night I was hitchhiking. I couldn't go home. I couldn't watch my mom after the surgery and the whole thing. I was very emotionally stunted as a kid, and I didn't know how to deal with that stuff. And within 3 months, I ran into some people that said, hey, you want to do some meth? I'm like, well, sure, free drugs. I thought it was like cocaine. And needless to say, it wasn't. And these folks weren't snorting it or smoking it. It was a group of people that were using needles and IV drug use. And I remember being in that garage going, I'm scared to death. I don't know. I don't like this. This is junky stuff. But you have to remember, up to that point, most of my juvenile and early years were finding validation in other people or fitting in and being a part of what other people were doing. And I couldn't say no. And just like most times when we're confronted by something we don't want to do and we have that deer in the headlights like look in our eyes, somebody saw that, oh, you've never done this, it's going to be okay, just hold your arm out and look the other way. And I refused to look weak in front of these people, and I wanted to get high. So I did. I followed his instructions. And when I let go of my arm, I want you to remember, Up to that point, my ADHD was untreated. When I let go of my arm, it was like the Starship Enterprise coming out of warp speed in front of a planet. My whole life up to that point had been like that noise, that whole area. When I let go of my arm, it was like, wow, I can see you. I'm actually can hear clearly. I'm present. I have this amazing euphoria. I'm not glorifying it, but that's what I felt. It was the first time in my life I felt like a human being normal. And from that point over the next 3 years, it was like a snowball going down a mountain. It was headed for hell. And along the way, it was destroying everything and everyone that I came in contact with. Until at 19, running around with people doing violent crimes, um, harder drugs. Methamphetamine was my primary drug at that point in time. I ended up involved in and responsible for a second degree homicide that was drug related. And through the course of events, ended up going to prison with a 17-year, 4-month sentence to life. um, that's where my life began a different track. And for the first 9 years of my incarceration, I did pretty much the same thing. What do you do when you're confronted with a life sentence in the state prison system and there's drugs and alcohol around and you're a drug addict and an alcoholic that's ran away from life? You did more drugs and alcohol to cope with and deal with that. And so about the first 9 years, that's exactly what I did. By day, I was getting a college education. I was the clerk. I was getting the AA and NA chronos. I was doing all the things that made me look good so that maybe when I went in front of the parole board, they would let me go home. But deep inside, every night I was closing that cell door and me and my roommate were getting lit. Until in 93, like early March 93, I got popped for possession of methamphetamine for distribution and being spun out. When I say that, high off my butt. I have never ever thought that you could go into psychosis on meth. And I lost 3 days in an ad seg cell, and I don't really remember much of it other than some voices and some brief moments. But I remember March 11th, 1993, right in that window, in that ad seg cell, about 1:30 in the morning, I was fully conscious and alert. Um, it was a moment of reckoning. I asked myself, or I was asking myself, how did this happen? This isn't who I am. How did I get here? How did my life end up here? And it was painful. How did this innocent little baby end up in a prison cell, probably never getting out, knowing this isn't who I am? I'm an empathic, emotional, caring human being that somehow running away from myself into crime and drugs, that part of me died for probably that's 19, probably 25 years of my life up to that point, from when that little boy started to move away from those feelings and find the quarters and find the shoplifting and find the marijuana. My life was never mine anymore. It was what everybody else wanted me to be or what I thought they wanted me to be. And I would do anything for that validation or to be a part of. I didn't have an identity. Lance did not have an identity. And it was in that morning that I remember saying a prayer. And I don't push God on people. That's your choice. However, your perception of the universe or higher power or lack thereof, that's your space. But for me, I know there's something bigger than me in the world, in the universe. And I said, God, I can't live a decent life and continue to do the things I'm doing. Help me. And there was no white light experience. There was no ahas or any of that. But eventually I went to a parole board within 3 months. I was scheduled anyway. And, I thought my life was technically over. I'm going to a parole board to ask you to let me go home after 9+ years in prison doing a life sentence for a drug-related homicide. Whether I was responsible and it was premeditated or not, I'm responsible for my actions, and I'm going in front of you to say, could I go home? And I just got caught using drugs and alcohol and acting like a fool. probably not going to let me go home. So I bypassed that whole thought process. And it was like, if any of you know about recovery, that kind of step one stuff where you just kind of an admission of surrender, admitting you have a problem, that your life's unmanageable, I was there completely. And it was liberating in a way to go into the parole board and raise my hand and acknowledge that I had a problem, that my life was unmanageable, and that I needed to figure it out and change it. And that was my mission from this point forward, in that moment moving forward, what I was going to do. And the parole board just kind of looked at me and was like, thank God you finally figured it out. Now get out of here and good luck. But something else happened in that board that day that really put that moment in cement for me. Miss Ellis Matthews' mom, the young man who died in 1984, she was in the parole board hearing representing the family. And Tina, his wife, and her parents were there. And I have to say, being in their presence that day, all I could tell myself is I was a piece of SHIT. I try to watch my language on social media to the best of my ability. And I judged myself. I couldn't forgive myself. I was a piece of garbage. And I'm sitting in a room listening to Miss Ellis talk about Matthew's life and all the things about him that made him unique, and the loss and what it meant to the family. And every word she said, I smaller and smaller and smaller became. And I just wanted her to look at me and tell me to burn in hell. Call me a piece of shit. I wanted her to just degrade me, because that's what I was doing to myself inside. When she got done talking, she looked over, she made eye contact, and she goes, we're Christians. We don't believe in hate. It would serve no purpose. We forgive you. But we don't understand how you could have done this to our loved one and to our family. And I pray you figure that out. And I have to say, I really didn't know how to receive her forgiveness that day. I didn't even know what that word meant. I didn't know how she could forgive me, but I couldn't. And I think that she that day gave me a piece of her spirit and set me on a path to figure it out, and to be here with you today to help you figure it out, to help somebody else figure it out, and honor her and Matthew and Miss Mafia and her son Brandon and the entire family that still has to live with the actions of my past and the ramifications of it. And I pray for them every day, and I honor them every day by how I live my life and help others. So I left that parole board hearing stunned, not having a clue what to do other than just be sober. And I ended up in another location within 3 months. I don't know how many are in here. I'm just talking for a minute. Hopefully you're hearing my story and connecting to some things. Hopefully not the bad things, because I don't want anybody to have to go down that far. But addiction was so ingrained, and it wasn't just drugs and alcohol. It was the narratives. It was the things that I spoke to myself about myself, how I saw myself in the world, the things I felt I needed to do to survive and be a part of. That's what drove me. That's addiction. A lot of people think it's just the drugs and the alcohol. It's the lifestyle. It's how we think. It's how we believe. It's how we perceive ourselves and the world around us and ourselves in it. It's much more complicated than just drugs and alcohol. And so off to another prison yard I went. Within 3 months, I was in a cell with this kid that was green. He was like Opie Taylor. He was the most innocent looking prisoner you would ever meet. And he was my cellie. And we're talking like we talk, and I'm sharing my story with him because that's how you get to know people. And he goes, you should go to those meetings over in education on Thursday night. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, yeah, they have AA over there. And I'm like, that shit doesn't work. I tried that when I was a kid. I went there, I read a book. Some guy said hi. I had a cup of coffee. They said a prayer. It didn't work for me. And I realize now, looking back on that moment, that I had a very naive interpretation of the recovery journey, not just with the 12 steps, if that's a person's choice, but a much bigger perspective than just recovery in that capacity or how to do it. And so I'm like, how bad am I? And I go, well, when I said that, he responded, well, I'll go with you. Now, how bad is it that this innocent looking little kid wants to take me to an AA meeting in state prison? And I'm like, okay, God, I hear you. So I'm going to these meetings with this kid, and he stops going. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase this because this is a whole other level of the story I'll go into next time. But we're going to these meetings, and I don't really think this stuff works. I'm reading the book, I can quote steps, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do. And kid stops going, and I'm going, and all of a sudden these two new people come in. None of us in that group that night knew how recovery worked. This is the power of recovery. None of us had a clue. We could quote the book, read the book. We were getting a chrono to try to manipulate people, but we really didn't know what we were doing. None of us were really in recovery. We were just sober, going to a meeting, staying out of trouble to the best of our ability. And an individual came into the group, a couple, but one in particular, new to the yard, new to the group. And we all talked out our necks like we do. And it got to him, and he talked a different language. He talked about pain and hurt, the impact of it on his soul, and how he thought about life and the world around him, and how it led him into gangs and violent behavior and state prison and a life sentence and death row, and then a life sentence when that was ruled unconstitutional. And he said he was going to these meetings, and some guy, a little guy named David G, came into a meeting, an H&I guy from the outside, and told a bunch of these hardcore gang members they were full of shit and not to waste his time. If they wanted help, he'd help them, but not to waste his time. And my mentor, sponsor, father figure, role model, whatever you want to call him, he was all of that and more. He respected that guy, David. And he said I started meeting with him and doing these steps and doing all these other things he was having me do, and he'd make these suggestions and I'd do them, and one day I realized they were working, so I kept doing them. They worked pretty good. And this stuff, I've been sober for quite a while, and I know what I'm doing. I'd love to help people, and my life's much better, and it could be better for you too. And he kind of just tossed the mic and passed it to the next person. I'm like, whoa, who the hell are you? Because that was the first time somebody spoke about transformation in a recovery process and knew that he obviously knew something I didn't know. And he was like a light in the room to everybody. And I would say within a year, probably 12 to 15 of us were following him around, learning about recovery, what principles meant, how to start doing things differently, why we do the things we do, why our brains work the way they work, why we in community don't have an identity and we need to build that within ourselves. You name it, we did it. And probably for a good 10 years, he was around my life and the guys that I was around. And most of us are home now doing this kind of work, helping people in one form or another in the communities around the world. And it's a great thing to be free and to be able to do this work and to honor Miss Ellis and her family and all the people I've ever hurt. More importantly, really honor my authentic self. That broken little kid doesn't have to be afraid anymore. He's not different. He's okay. And I know that if some of you are at home right now and watching this or in your car or wherever you're at, I hope it's connecting because you're not alone. There's a part of us we don't want to look at. And our addiction is not to look at that. We'll do everything up over here or over there, but we don't want to look within here. Because within, we don't really like what we see or feel. And maybe we don't even know what that looks like anymore. Addiction's much bigger than drugs and alcohol. And so I don't know if this made any sense tonight. I don't know how many people are watching because my phone's flipped around. I'm looking at the camera side because my wife tells me social media should be this way. But I love you. I appreciate this time with you. My next time I'll start coming in with some stories about recovery and identifying some things, maybe just 20-minute, 30-minute clips, maybe even 15-minute stories. To kind of connect with you. If you have any questions around recovery, if you have a loved one suffering, you can email me at info@lifeoveraddiction.com or find my link in the bio. My email is in there. You can email me and I am here to help you. I do everything from pre-interventions through aftercare with a family so there's continuity of care. Again, my job is to help you or your loved one find a path out and healing for everybody around them. I appreciate this time. If you've gotten any value from this or connected to this, I hope you come back for more. I appreciate your subscribing to my channel and helping me grow it by sharing it. And there are a lot of videos and more coming on different topics around addiction, around life. And I just hope to have you join me on the journey. Thank you so much. God bless you and keep you until we meet again. Peace.